This video is to tell you a story about what happened to us when we ran aground in the Stockholm archipelago. There's the second sort of episode of this season 3 shows us leaving, and the footage carries right up to the point to where we ran aground. I didn't shoot any footage during all the chaos or after that because just kind of in like survival crisis mode. But I wanted to make this as like a standalone video, so it didn't get lost in the season or in the series, but also could possibly be like a cautionary tale for any yachties or sailors out there that might run across this particular situation that we did, and hopefully not make the same mistakes we made. So we left Usturo and headed out around noon. It was quite a bit of wind, like 25-30 knots before we left. In the channels, it would be anywhere from 30 knots to nothing. There were tons of wind shadows, and then it would accelerate in the channels and stuff. But we had a reef in the main and like the working jib up. So it was like variable conditions sailing, and but we were making our way. It was never clear, I guess right now I should say, Neil, who was the captain and the owner of Arcturus, the 1966 Allied Sea Breeze 36-foot that we're sailing on, I don't want to make any assumptions about why he made certain decisions, so I'm going to try to tell this story without doing that. There are certain things that me and him talked about that I feel comfortable saying, yeah, we talked about this and we both agreed on this, and so that stuff I'll touch on. But he doesn't want to talk about this story, so he's not here to talk about it with me. So I'm going to avoid trying to understand or question why he made choices he made. So it wasn't clear to me what anchorage we were heading to. He had picked out a couple and just wanted to sail until we got closer to the end of the day, and then he was going to choose one because I guess there were a bunch in the area which we were heading. We were basically making our first day passage, and then we were going to spend the night, and then the next day push for the Åland Islands. So we were sailing through the archipelago, and he was navigating using an iPad Pro that was working great. We were using avionics. It showed the dangers. As long as you're zoomed in real tight, you can see all the dangers, which there was no shortage of dangers in those waters. But he didn't have it plugged in, so it ran out of juice and died. We were in a pretty large expanse of water at the time. I was at the helm. I think I was holding a compass course of 30 degrees, and we're sailing at probably 2 to 3 knots, just like light wind. It was chill. It was like, and so he's messing with the iPad, and I'm not sure why he didn't like use his iPhone, because he just kept trying. It wouldn't power up. He kept trying to get it to power up, and we're cruising along, and the Allied Sea Breeze has a bronze centerboard, the lifting centerboard, and we had it up. We had like a 3-foot draft with the centerboard up. So as we were sailing along, I hear bronze on stone, and the boat grinds to a halt. And I was like, what in the world? And I look overboard, and we're standing in like 2 feet of water. I could move the tiller so that the tiller would point to port, no problem, but then amidships it just stopped, like it was hitting a rock, and you couldn't point it to starboard at all. So we pulled up all the floorboards. We weren't taking on water, so that was the main thing. And then we could see that we were just standing in shallow water, at least off the port side. So I asked the captain if I could put on my wetsuit and snorkel, dive on the boat so I could make sure there was no damage to the rudder and see what the situation was. And he was like, no problem. Put on my wetsuit, get in the water. I hop off the boat and I'm standing up in waist deep water. And I swim underneath, everything was fine, the rudder was fine. We're just sitting on a big, smooth, mossy rock. So I get to the port side where it's, you know, the shallowest, and I'm trying to rock the boat as hard as I can. And it doesn't move, nothing. Like, you can rock an automobile more than you could rock. That boat didn't budge, nothing. She was sitting hard aground on this rock. And I'll put the coordinates below where the rock is. You can actually see it, like, it's underwater, but you can see it even on Google Maps if you zoom in to the latitude and longitude. So I walk around the boat and I try to determine where it gets deep. So, you know, it seemed that we got deep water off our starboard bow, which was perfect, you know. So it's like it got deep real quick. So if we could just get moving forward and to starboard, we're stoked. So I get back on board and we talk through all the different plans or options for getting off the ground. The big problem was Sweden doesn't have any tides. So we couldn't just wait for high tide. Like most places, it's embarrassing, but you hang out and wait. High tide comes, you float off, and you motor out of there. That wasn't an option for us. Also, we're in the middle of nowhere. Like, we're not in a marked channel. We were just kind of cutting through the archipelago, which isn't uncommon. You just have to be careful and keep an eye out for shallow spots and rocks and stuff. So, we, first thing the captain wanted to do was get the dinghy in the water. So there's a hard bottom fiberglass Sojourner dinghy on the deck, and he wanted to take it off so that maybe we could get some weight off the front end to help her float, maybe. So we got her in the water, tied her off. Now, a couple options for getting off the ground is you can row your anchor out, drop it, and then use the windlass to try to pull yourself towards where the anchor's set. And that's a known method that works in some occasions. I had concerns that it wouldn't work where we were because I had been on the rock that we were on and it was very smooth. And the other problem was that boat didn't have a windlass. So even if we got the anchor set in something that wasn't a smooth stone, we would have had to set up snap shackles and try to go back to like a winch with the road. So that was problematic. Wasn't ideal for sure. The other option is you can hang like a bucket of water or a person off the boom or off a halyard, try to get the boat leaning over so that she'll float. So we tried that method next. I swung out on the bosun's chair on the end of the boom, bounce, bounce, bounce. It didn't do anything, just sat there. So then we tried, just for fun, we tried turning the motor and motoring in reverse, forward, nothing. Just stirred up the water. Nothing happened. And so I suggested we put up all of our sail, like our biggest sail plan we could put up, because there was a squall on the horizon, and it looked like it was coming towards us. So Neil agreed. He was like, yeah, it makes sense. So we put up the largest headsail, like a 155 maybe, and we shook the reef out in the main, got the main up, and got it all tied down. And here's where we made a huge mistake. Neil decided he wanted to try the anchor also. So he gets in the dinghy, and I hand him the anchor, and he's trying to row it out so that he can get it out there. And it starts sprinkling, and the squall's getting to us, and that's the problem. Was like we tried to do two fixes at once. So he's about 20 feet or so from the boat, maybe a little further, in the dinghy, with the anchor in the dinghy. All the road is spilled out in the water, and the squall hits us, and the boat just takes off. There's no sound. I didn't hear any scraping of stone. It just took off, and we have a lot of sail up. So I start just sailing past Neil. So Neil's in the dinghy, and I start sailing past him. And when he gets parallel to Arcturus, the dinghy disappears underwater. Luckily, his feet weren't caught up in it, but the anchor just pulls the dinghy underwater. And I can see it like a movie. There's like this glowing white orb that just got darker and darker as it went deeper underwater. And so I hurry. He's in the water. I hurry, get all the sail down, and we stop roughly. Now, Neil didn't have a life jacket on. Neil is not a irresponsible sailor at all. In his defense, like, there was a false sense of security where we were, because I was just standing up in waist-deep water. So it's like this crazy thing to where, yeah, we could stand up there, but you can't see where that location is if you get in the water, and it's, 50 feet, like 4 feet from there. So I wouldn't have put a life jacket on either when I got in the dinghy. If I'd have been the one rowing the anchor out, I would not have put a life jacket on. So he's in the water, no life jacket, and he is like windward of me, and so he was close enough at that point to where I was trying to throw him a line. Like I couldn't get the anchor up because I tried to pull the anchor up so I could motor to him, and the anchor wouldn't budge. It was like a bathtub full of water, nothing. So, and I was concerned about, even if I did motor, about getting propped and driving straight into the rock that we were just on. So, and he was close enough, I thought it should be no problem. We didn't have a throwable PFD like on the deck, but in reality there was so much wind from the squall, I think it would have just blown it back towards me anyway, because every time I tried to throw a line to him, the wind just blew it back. So, but what I didn't realize at all was that the boat was moving away from Neil. And soon there's a fair distance between us, and he's swimming, and I keep asking him if he's okay, and he tried to float on his back, and there's kind of a lot of chop from the wind, and he starts taking mouthfuls of water, and he starts to panic, and he was like, help me, help me. And so I knew I couldn't swim to him with a life vest on, so I just grabbed a fender and jumped in. I still had my wetsuit on, thankfully, and I swam out to him. I handed him the fender. I was like, are you okay? And he was like, yeah, I'm fine now. And I was like, okay, cool. I turn around, and the boat is really far away, and I can't give anyone like a accurate distance because I don't want to give a false representation of how far or how close I was, but the boat was like this big and moving away from us. So when I jumped in the water, I was like, oh, well, the anchor's down. It was down, but it was in a smooth bottom dinghy, so it was just like sliding across the seafloor as the wind's hitting the freeboard and just blowing the ship, along with it, because we're still in the middle of a squall. So I start swimming as hard as I can, swimming. And I get to where I think is about halfway, and my vision starts going dark, like vignetting. And I had recently read this book called Deep that talks about freediving, and it talks about, in it they talk about the symptoms of blacking out. A lot of freedivers will learn to tune those symptoms so that they can hold their breath longer. So I was like, oh man, I'm about to black out. So I flip on my back, floating on my back, and Arcturus is a yawl rig, so I could see both the masts. So I'm like kicking on my back, looking at the two masts moving around, and I feel like I start falling asleep. So I shake myself out of it, and I was like, oh no, like I might drown. Like, this is not good. Flip back over, the boat's still moving away from us. I swim as hard as I can, and I start to black out again. And I stopped, and I was like, this is where I'm gonna die. And I remember looking around at the scene, I was like, I'm gonna die here. And later on, Neil told me that when I stopped, he thought I was gonna die. He was like, when you stopped swimming, I thought that was it. And I just like pushed through. And my scuba training kind of kicked in, and I was slowing my breathing, trying to stop the hyperventilation, which I'm sure was causing the blackout symptoms. So I would swim until my vision started going dark, and I floated my back till I felt like I was going to fall asleep. I did this several times, and then the boat stops moving. So the squall had passed. Once I saw it stop moving, I was like, I can make this, no problem. So I swam as hard as I can, And in the chaos, the sea hook had fallen over, was hanging off the tow rail, which was great because that was going to give me something to hold on to. Got to the boat, held on to the sea hook, caught my breath, and then tried to pull myself up, and I was completely spent. I didn't have any energy. Normally, a boat with that little freeboard, I can pull myself on deck, no problem. But I was just trembling. So I looked around, and I worked my way to the stern with the sea hook on the tow rail, because there's a Cape Horn wind vane on the stern. So I got back there and counted to 10, and then climbed up the Cape Horn wind vane with the last bit of energy I had and got on deck. And cut my forehead in the process of trying to get back on board. With the rest of the series, you'll see this cut on my forehead. And got up there, and I yell immediately, Neil, and he's making his way on the fender, like kicking. He's still fully clothed, has like a jacket on and everything. And he's making his way back to the boat. And I go again and try to pull up the anchor, and no, not happening. It's totally stuck. And by this point, Neil was close enough that I knew everything was going to be okay. He got alongside the boat and was clear-headed enough to like make a joke, as I'm trying to pull him on board. So got him on board, and he strips down, and he's walking around, and I'm like, you got to get downstairs, man. You got to get clothes on. And he was like, I'm not even cold. And I was like, dude, you're hyperthermic. Like, you need to get downstairs. And soon he was down there bundled up, and he's just shaking violently, like shaking. So extreme. He couldn't hold anything or anything. So I yelled down, I'm like, I'm cutting the anchor loose. Like, this is not good. There was another squall coming. I cut the anchor and start the engine, and I'm motoring basically in circles for like over half an hour, where it was like, it would be like 50 feet of water, and then 12 feet of water, and then 50 feet of water, and then 9 feet of water. And I'm like freaking out because I couldn't find my way out. There was like, it felt like everywhere I went, there were these, the water got low. And even if it got to 14, maybe I could have kept going and it would have went to 62, but I didn't know. So I was so freaked out. I just kept zigzagging and driving in circles. And finally, Neil stopped shaking enough to where he found an old GPS that was on the boat from the previous owner. And found our coordinates, and then we figured out where we were on a paper chart, because our location wasn't on a paper chart. So we had no idea where we were without the iPad Pro or an iPhone or anything. We had no way to know where we were. So we found the paper chart, and then I looked at it so we could figure out how to get out. So I get us out to deeper water. Neil figures out, this port, Blido. He's like, okay, we'll head for there, so just hold this course or whatever. And then eventually he got the iPad back on or whatever, and but the next 4 hours, I was on deck at the helm, getting us to Blido. And we got in, I think around like 8 o'clock, and we were pretty rattled. If I hadn't had my wetsuit on, I believe we both would have died, because if I hadn't made it back to the boat, I don't think that Neil could have gotten himself on board, because he had been in the water like 25 minutes. So, and I was in the water like 15 minutes, but I had a wetsuit on. So the cold I'm not sure the cold affected me, but it really would have been difficult for him to get back on the boat at that point. So, it, very scary. I'm super stoked to be alive. We pulled into Blido, tied up. I went ashore, called my girlfriend Camille, told her the story, everything. I was really rattled. She told me I sounded like I was in shock. Then we grabbed some dinner. It was very somber. And then we passed out, slept for like 10 hours or something crazy. But I was stoked that like the next morning, Neil was like, "We got to keep going. We got to push for Åland." And, you know, he didn't want to take a day off, which is the same mindset I'm always in. So I was like stoked to be like, "Yes, let's go. We got to go." So the next day we had an incredible glassy passage to Mariehamn in the Åland Islands, and the rest of the trip was incredible. We did have like one super gnarly passage at the end because there were kept these wind fronts kept coming through that were like 30 to 40 knots, and one day we made a run for it and didn't make it all the way, and there was one passage at the end that sucked, but it was just uncomfortable. It was never dangerous. So that's what happened. And there's gonna be a lot of people being like, "Well, you should have done this, you should have done that," you know, and yeah, we made mistakes, but that's why I'm making this video, you know, to tell people, you know, don't do that. And I know there are golden rules: don't ever leave someone unattended, don't leave the boat with no one on it. But my only option was to watch my friend drown, or to get in the water and swim to him when I was completely sure that I could make it. And I guess I did make it, but and I'm not sure that I would have done anything different other than maybe take a second fender for myself. But yeah, so, you know, from like the comfort of your own home when you're not on a boat or in these conditions, it's easy to be like, "Oh, well, this is what you should have done." But the reality is like when you're out there and things are happening, sometimes you just have to make do with what you got. So, but I hope that like if any of you are watching this, if you ever find yourself in a similar situation, that you'll remember this video and be like, "Oh shit, like, let's not do that, you know, let's keep this in mind, that this could be a possibility." So I guess the thing to take away from this is that there's many ways to fix these sort of problems at sea, and choose one and stick with it. And if it doesn't work, then stop that one and try another one. But don't do like we did. You know, don't try to do two fixes at once, because it nearly cost us both of our lives. Looking forward to you guys seeing the rest of the videos from this season. Åland was amazing, and there was lots of incredible adventures. Beautiful scenery, magical islands. So I'm glad I made it through so I could do that and still be here. So thanks for watching, and until next time, fair winds.